Good morning, everyone. I call the session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you very much. Before we begin, I want to start our session today with a little public service announcement. A reminder to all New Yorkers of an income-eligible program known as the Home Energy Assistance Program, or HEAP. The HEAP program provides financial support to income-eligible New Yorkers to help manage their heating and cooling needs. If you're eligible for supplemental nutrition assistance, supplemental Social Security, or temporary assistance, I encourage you to apply for the HEAP program benefits, which are available through OTDA. However you heat your home, be it through oil, natural gas, electricity, propane, coal, or anything else, the program is there to help New Yorkers in need, and I encourage you to seek it out and apply. We'll be putting information on how to do so through social media, and that'll be out later today. Thank you. Now, before moving to the agenda, I want to take a moment and conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Present.
Commissioner James DeLacy.
Here.
Commissioner John Howard.
Here.
Commissioner David Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Thank you. Now, I also wish to ask, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on items 201, 202, or 301 on the regular agenda? Commissioner Berman?
I'm not recusing. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
No on any of them.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
No recusals.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Nope.
Thank you. We'll now go to our first item for discussion, item 201, case 22-S-0659, which addresses Consolidated Edison steam rates. It'll be presented today by Administrative Law Judge Erica Bergen and Anthony Belsito. Nicola Jones and Tim Canty are also available for questions. Judge Bergen, please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. Before you is the draft order that adopts the joint proposal submitted in the Consolidated Edison Company of New York's steam rate case. Con Edison initiated the case when it filed tariff leaves, testimony, and exhibits on November 22nd, 2022, seeking new rates for a one-year plan based on an asserted need for revenue increase as of the company's February 2023 update of approximately $140.5 million. On receiving the filing, Judge Belsito and I held a procedural conference and subsequently issued a procedural schedule that, among other things, set dates for the filing of responsive testimony by staff and interveners and the commencement of a litigated hearing to receive testimony and exhibits into the evidentiary record. Responsive testimony was filed by 4 parties on March 24th, 2023, and the company filed its rebuttal on April 21st, 2023. Staff's recommendation for a one-year revenue increase was $94.4 million, a $46 million reduction of the company's initial request. Staff, the company, and other parties thereafter entered settlement negotiations. The negotiations resulted in a joint proposal that was filed on September 1st, 2023. If adopted by the Commission, the joint proposal would establish a 3-year rate plan for the company that would cover the period of November 1st, 2023 through October 31st, 2026. The joint proposal is supported by the company, DPS staff, the City of New York, Consumer Power Advocates, and Natural Resources Defense Council, and is not opposed by any party. The sponsoring parties propose that the annual revenue increases be implemented on a levelized basis to avoid disproportionate bill impacts in any single rate year. As such, the joint proposal includes levelized revenue increases of $77.8 million in each rate year. The largest rate drivers are increasing property taxes, decreasing steam sales, depreciation expenses, and infrastructure spending to meet Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or CLCPA, targets. Most of these are outside the company's control. Another factor affecting the unlevelized rate year 1 increase is the fact that the company has not had increased rates since 2014. Since that time, the company's rates have become stale and no longer accurately represent current costs and conditions. Further, energy policies in the state have significantly changed since 2014, including the enactment of the CLCPA, as well as New York City's Local Law 97. The joint proposal contains terms that are intended to incentivize the company to file for approval of new rates in no more than 4 years to avoid the magnitude of increase necessitated by sale rates. The revenue requirement increases proposed in the joint proposal compare favorably to the likely litigated result of a 1-year rate case. For instance, the rate year 1 unlevelized revenue requirement of $110.3 million is about 20% lower than the company's initial request of $140.5 million. The joint proposal requires the company to commence various decarbonization efforts, which are designed to advance the state's CLCPA goals, as well as address New York City's Local Law 97, which was adopted by the city in 2019 and requires large buildings to meet certain energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emission limits by 2030. Specifically, the joint proposal provides initial funding for 2 decarbonization projects. The joint proposal provides $3 million for the company's first project, allowing it to conduct preliminary work on installing an industrial heat pump at the East River Station. As proposed, this heat pump would preheat steam boiler feed water or directly produce steam to reduce the amount of fossil fuel consumed to produce the steam. This would reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with the East River Station and increase boiler efficiency. The joint proposal also provides $500,000 for the company's second project, which would allow it to conduct preliminary work for a small district hot water loop system. This project would use waste condensate to provide hot water heating to neighboring buildings that currently use fuel oil or natural gas, thereby reducing emissions from those buildings. The company can seek full funding for these projects and others through the proposed Future Decarbonization Project Approval Mechanism. Petitions under this mechanism are required to include information regarding the design, location, feasibility, costs, and anticipated emissions reductions, which will help ensure that the decarbonization projects proposed are feasible, cost-effective, and will reasonably contribute to the achievement of CLCPA goals. The joint proposal also requires the company to conduct 2 studies in furtherance of its decarbonization efforts. The STEAM Decarbonization Study and Implementation Plan will include a coordinated long-term analysis of pathways for achieving steam system decarbonization targets through 2050. This study must be filed with the Secretary by December 31st, 2024. Under the adopted joint proposal, the company will also be required to develop a STEAM business development plan. This plan will identify obstacles to STEAM's competitiveness and make recommendations for addressing those obstacles. The joint proposal further includes provisions designed to provide assistance to Con Ed's customers. First, within 90 days of the filing of the decarbonization study and implementation plan, the company must convene a stakeholder meeting regarding the company's plan to request an adjustment to New York City's local law coefficient applicable to the STEAM system. In addition, beginning in January 2024, the company will offer customer building audits that will provide a detailed analysis of energy usage, identifying wasteful or excessive usage, and recommending efficiency upgrades or other ways for customers to reduce costs. These audits will also include information regarding funding for efficiency improvements that are available to STEAM customers through the company, as well as through the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. The joint proposal also requires the company to expand its outreach and education program, including website enhancements related to the conversion to steam service from oil or gas, as well as educational workshops. Finally, pursuant to the joint proposal, the company will file a marginal cost study for steam service by December 31st, 2024. This study, along with the STEAM Business Development Plan and the STEAM Decarbonization Study, will inform the development of a discounted steam rate to be considered by the Commission. This rate is anticipated to be available to disadvantaged communities accounts, New York City Housing Authority buildings that convert to steam from oil or gas, as well as other new and converted buildings that meet certain criteria. All these provisions are fully supported by the signatory parties, represent significant and immediate steps towards the implementation of the CLCPA. In sum, in our view, the terms of the joint proposal will ensure that the company has sufficient funding to maintain the safety and reliability of the steam infrastructure used to serve the public, and will provide the company the ability to earn a return on the value of that property, thereby ensuring financial soundness. We further believe that the joint proposal produces just and reasonable rates that appropriately balance the interests of the ratepayers with the fairness to the investors and the long-term viability of the company, and is consistent with sound environmental, social, and economic policies of the Commission and the state. This concludes our presentation. We are available for questions.
Thank you, Judge Bergen and Judge Belcito. I appreciate you bringing this to the Commission. I'm surprised that there was no opposition to this, but I'm pleased that the parties came together in agreement that this was the right pathway forward. Also encouraged to see that so many of the various improvements regarding performance and other metrics that have been used in electric and gas rate cases for some time now have made their way into the steam one after all this time. So that's a very pleasing accomplishment, and I want to commend you and staff for bringing that about. I'm also encouraged by all the various decarbonization measures that are included in this. You know, the goal of meeting Local Law 97 in New York City and the CLCPA, they're very intertwined, and the steam system's ability to support that is something that I'm encouraged to see is being considered and explored. All said, I think your work here is commendable, and appreciate the effort. And I see this in the best interest of ratepayers, and look forward to the continued discussion. And with that, Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I want to first thank staff for all the hard work on this, and sort of just reiterate that we have a broad mandate to ensure that consumers receive safe and reliable utility service at reasonable rates and with the least adverse effect upon the environment. And I recognize that we have an incredibly important and unique role in balancing the interests of the private needs of the shareholder to ensure continued investment in these services. And it's really important for us that we take a critical look at our mission that's really to the economic well-being of the state and its citizens, and that can't be overstated. I did, as the chair, did take a pause because there was no opposition. And I don't think that there's a reason for the opposition, but the fact that there was no opposition, you know, is something sort of to look at and understand. I think it really goes to sort of the heart of the way this was approached, but also I think that there might be a disconnect in other rate cases where there's significant opposition that lessons can be sort of looked at here in terms of some of the same issues were not opposed. In here, it's steam, so maybe there didn't seem to be sort of a knee-jerk reaction to, you know, being sort of opposed to it, even though I think people need to understand sort of the mechanisms of where steam comes from. The largest rate drivers in this case, as ALJ said, are due to increases in property taxes, decreasing sales, depreciation expenses, and infrastructure spending to meet CLCPA targets. And it really should be underscored that those are largely outside the company's control. So we're looking at increases that are really necessary and outside of the company's control. For me, I really do like that we are having an incentive or focused on an incentive to bring the company back in. This last steam rate case was a long time ago, and so to the extent that we see that there was a need to address that because the rates were stale, I think is important, just kind of looking forward in trying to figure out the right time for companies to be incentivized to come back in. The other thing I think that is I like from this rate case is the weather normalization adjustment. And sort of my feeling is that this helps to ease the steam business volatility. And I wonder if the ALJ can speak a little bit to the weather normalization adjustment mechanism and why that's so important.
Steam sales are very dependent on the weather and the outside temperature. So if there's a particularly warm winter, steam sales are likely to be low. And if there's a particularly cold winter, they're likely to be high. But the revenue requirement is relatively static for the company. So if they sell less steam in one period, they have to make up that the revenue for that period somewhere else. So rates could adjust, or the adjustment could take place over a period of time, especially under the new fuel adjustment clause mechanisms. But basically what the weather normalization does is kind of smooth out that pattern. So it adjusts for variable weather, and it keeps the revenue stream more static or more stable. So it's better for customers, so rates aren't going up and down quickly, and the revenue is more consistent for the company as well, so they can plan better.
Great, thank you. And can you speak a little bit to the current status? There is no RDM, and just the current status of pending proceedings and proceedings related to the RDM as it relates to Con Ed and STEAM.
So I believe it's being taken
My
up.
understanding.
Go on.
No, I was going to say my understanding is that hearing feedback. I'll let you, since you explain, and then make sure we're all on the same page.
The company did apply for an RDM and an energy efficiency case, but they've since withdrawn that request, and so it's no longer an issue.
I just want to make a specific sort of making sure that that's clear, because there's another part in the order that talks about alternative methods for addressing the disincentive for the company to promote steam usage reductions through energy efficient programs, and those may be addressed when the company's energy efficiency proposals are considered. My understanding is that the withdrawal of the separate RDM proceeding, the petition, doesn't mean that that was then put into the energy efficiency pending petition where we might take up other things. I just want to make clear what we're doing as relates to the RDM.
I could take that, Commissioner Berman. This is Marco Padula. Your understanding is correct, that the filing that they made under the energy efficiency proceeding only addresses STEAM energy efficiency programs.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other issue, just in terms of looking at it, make sure I have the right page. In the order, we talk about that the Commission has already begun to implement the objectives of the CLCPA through various proceedings, and we go into some detail on the different programs, as well as the New York State Climate Action Council final scoping plan. I do just want to reiterate that that final scoping plan was is not a legal document to the extent that it is not a final, we must follow that. In fact, the Climate Action Council final scoping plan was putting forward recommendations that were then to go to the State Energy Board, Planning Board, through its due deliberation. And then the agencies and the legislature and others may take a look at that based on that, but that the final scoping plan itself is not the be-all and end-all. And I just think that that's important, especially as we move forward and they seem to get embedded into orders and directives that people are reminded that that final scoping plan is not actually legally binding. With that, I also am very appreciative of the focus on other opportunities for decarbonization and the decarbonization projects that are being done, will be looked at, and that there's an opportunity to come back to the Commission for further assessment and engagement on decarbonization opportunities. And I very much appreciate that, especially to the extent that the Commission as a whole will have the opportunity to weigh in. With that, I will be voting for this. I think it's really well done. I do think we have a lot of challenges, especially there's a lot of unknowns as we go forward in a lot of our clean energy issues, as well as local law 97, et cetera. So I just think that it's something for us to be mindful of, that this is not a static process, and we will need to take a careful look. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be supporting this. There's no opposition to it.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Let's try this again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
Good. I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Judge, I want to congratulate you on a job well done, but I have a few questions. Approximately how many customers are on the Con Ed Steam system?
There's about approximately 1,600 customers on the Steam system.
That represent tens of hundreds of thousands of square feet of occupied space, right?
Yeah, the large commercial and apartment buildings in New York City.
So these are including like the Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, some buildings that everybody in the whole world would know, right?
That's correct.
Great, thank you. And this is, in fact, the biggest steam system in the nation.
That's correct.
And if not the biggest among the globe. So, again, we're talking about a big system that hardly anybody knows about because it just works and is sort of invisible. I'll get to Tim will probably anticipate my next question. What percentage of this increase is attributable to New York City taxes?
Approximately 45% of this increase is attributed to the increase in property taxes. There's also an IOU from the customers from the last rate case. So if you factor that into property taxes, I think it's about 61% of the increase.
61% of an increase has nothing to do with the supply of energy to these 1,600 customers, correct?
That's correct.
61%. Tragically, the property tax issue, which I have long decried in New York City, is not going to be changed in the near term because of the very negative fiscal condition of the city of New York as it currently exists. The structural inequities that have been built into the New York City fisc just seem to be ignored. And while these customers appear to be among the premier tenants across the city of New York, the same arithmetic works to the poorest customer in the city of New York for the Con Ed system. And again, it is really a tragedy. It is rarely written about. Well, as a matter of fact, it's never written about. And I have yet to see in my term here on the commission or prior to that any meaningful discussion of this issue among either this mayor, the previous mayor, or multiple mayors that I have observed over the last decades. It's just wildly unfair. Additionally, I want to point out that the great promise of the thermal energy systems that are currently underway and under development in the city of New York, which have great promise for decarbonization of buildings and providing meaningful employment to displaced utility workers, will also suffer this very negative impact of usury property taxes as part of that system. That being said, I think we did the best, and since there were no opposition to this particular item, it also belies the position that nobody paid attention. I know we did, and I know staff and the trial staff and the judges certainly did. So all in all, I do give a job well done. But again, as we look to particularly decarbonization efforts that require major capital investments in the STEAM system, will also trigger new property tax events in the city of New York, which will just add to this spiral of very unfair taxation going forward. I wish there was a period on this dais that I could not have to talk about this, but I feel compelled each time an issue, particularly coming up with Con Ed, comes along. But that being said, good job, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Chair Christian. Yeah, thank you, Judge Bergen, Judge Belcito, and to the program and technical staff who worked on this item. I just have a question of process and then just a comment or two. This commission approved a joint proposal from this company only 3 or 4 months ago as it relates to their electric and gas system. I'm just curious, and I asked this, I think it was Commissioner Berman, who mentioned earlier the incentives for the company to come in more frequently as it relates to their steam system, more frequently than once every 10 years or so, which I guess is what we are now. Would there be anything in this 3-year joint proposal and the one that we approved over the summer that would prohibit the company in 3 years from coming in and filing for electric, gas, and steam all in one filing? Would that be possible? And I only asked the question based on again, a process order.
There's nothing in this case, in this proposed order, that would prohibit them from doing that. I can't speak to what might have been in the other order for electric and gas
Sure.
that would, but I'm not aware of anything that would prohibit that.
Okay, and again, that would be up to the company, of course. I only asked, just, again, based on consolidation of all of those. Okay, thank you. I have a feeling that the lack of any opposition to this joint proposal, part of that may have to do with the good work done by staff here and in the original filing from the company on decarbonization efforts. I think that's certainly a high point of this joint proposal. And finally, I would just, as a takeaway, note that we are only a half a month into the first rate year of the 3-year rate term. We have not seen a rate case where we are not dealing with rate compression in quite some time. So I would hope that And I know it's not an apples-to-apples comparison when we look at all rate cases. But as we move forward, this would certainly be a model as a way to, to move away as much as we can from the effects on ratepayers of rate compression, which we're obviously not seeing in this particular joint proposal. So, well done, thank you, and I plan on supporting the joint proposal and the order. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I'm also planning to vote yes. I don't have any questions. I did plan on noting the lack of opposition, and the only thing I'd add to what has already been said was I concluded that that's because of this JP is a product of a transparent and participatory process. So I think that this is, a good product based on good work, not just technical work, but also engagement with the stakeholders. So, I'm very impressed. So I plan to vote yes, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just clarify a little bit on the response to Commissioner Valesky's question about filing together. I do want to note that while the company is certainly able to file all three together and actually has in the past, the terms on the joint proposals and the rate years are different for the electric and gas systems than they are for the steam system. Steam system runs, the rate year runs from November 1st through October 31st each year. Electric and gas, Ms. Jones?
It is by calendar year. It is from January to December. And for the electric and gas, they're going towards the end of their first rate year.
So,
I'm
right,
sorry,
so they would
Nicola,
have to...
I'm sorry. We couldn't hear the first part of what Nicola said. Could you please repeat it?
Sure. I just want to test. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I said for the electric and gas rate case for Con Edison, it runs on a calendar year basis, so from January to December. So for their rate term, they're going towards the end of their first rate year.
So essentially what that means is while there's no legal prohibition against them filing all three businesses together, gas and electric would essentially be in a 10-month stay-out situation at the end of their rate plan if they were to wait until they were allowed to file steam based on their agreement here to stay out until October 31st, 2026.
Thank you, Judge Lee.
Thank you for that clarification.
Nicola, for that clarification. I appreciate that.
Okay. Now with that, I'll bring this item to vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to adopt the terms of the joint proposal as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you all. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. We'll now move to our second item for discussion. Again, thank you, everyone. Our second item for discussion today, item 202, case 22-M-0314, which addresses utilities diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. It'll be presented today by Peter Lavery. Jeff Hogan is also available for questions. Mr. Lavery, when you're ready, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. My name is Peter Lavery, and I am in the Management and Operations Audit section of the Department's Office of Accounting, Audits, and Finance. I'm here today to present the draft order releasing the assessment and establishing continued processes in the proceeding to review utilities' diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. Could we cue up the slideshow presentation to accompany? Please.
Peter, one moment, please. Wondering if we can get a little more volume on your mic?
Sure thing. Is that a little better for you, Chair?
I think so, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Throughout the discussion this morning, I will refer to diversity, equity, and inclusion as DEI. Thank you. Next slide, please. As described in the Commission's June 2022 order initiating the proceeding, the goals of this proceeding are to enhance utilities' existing DEI efforts and ensure the utilities can learn from their peers and stakeholder input. Next slide, please. The June 22 order required electric, gas, and water utilities with 100 employees or more to develop and file DEI plans. The June 22 order also directed staff to host a working group effort for the subject utilities to aid in the development of those plans and to engage an independent third-party consultant to assist in facilitating the working group and assessing the utility DEI plans. Next slide, please. In August of 2022, staff issued a request for proposals to engage an independent consultant for these efforts. In September, the subject utilities submitted their initial DEI plans, and in October, staff selected FTI Consulting to assist these efforts. Looking forward to January of 2023, FTI provided its assessment of the initial DEI plans, which included feedback to each utility identifying improvement opportunities for their respective plans. And this feedback was also used to inform topic areas for the working group sessions. The working groups commenced in February of 2023 and concluded in April. These were collaborative sessions to share current strategies, efforts, and future goals, as well as to identify best practices, areas of success, and current challenges. The subject utilities' participation was excellent throughout. They consistently engaged in open and candid conversations about their efforts and challenges. Many utilities offered some helpful insights and resources to assist others' implementation strategies. And FTI's assistant was also first rate. Its team offered helpful insights and resources to engage and support the discussions. Following the working group effort, the subject utilities submitted revised DEI plans that were informed by FTI's initial evaluation, as well as the working group discussions. In May of 2023, FTI provided parties with its final assessment, which summarizes the progress achieved from the initial to revised plans for each utility and includes updates to the respective maturity levels of each utility's DEI programs and strategies. It also outlines areas of focus for each utility as their plans and strategies will evolve. Next slide, please. The draft order provides the following summary of FTI's assessment. FTI led a structured approach to understand the current maturity levels of DEI programs and assess the plans for each utility. The consultant conducted surveys and interviews of utility stakeholders to explore plan details and to test each organization's self-awareness of their DEI progress. Give the next slide, please. FTI used a quadrant model to illustrate the effectiveness of each utility's DEI plan. FTI examined how clear each utility articulated its ambitions in its plan, represented on the aspiration axis, as well as how the utility specified robust near and medium-term action steps in pursuit of its strategies. And that's shown here on the action axis. We could go to the next slide. The consultant found that the subject utilities' revised DEI plans were much clearer than the initial plans overall. For most utilities, the revised plans clarified their DEI ambitions in line with their business strategies and included more explicit action steps such as measurable goals and prioritized actions. The utility progress is captured in FTI's revised quadrant chart. As shown here, the majority of the subject utilities made progress toward the upper right corner of this chart, which indicates each of their progress toward the target in the stakeholder value quadrant. FTI noted that utilities initially assessed to be in the foundational or grassroots quadrants showed the most improvement between their initial and revised DEI plan submissions. Next slide, please. In interpreting DEI maturity levels, FTI assessed the subject utilities across 15 global diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmarks. Most of the subject utilities received proactive ratings across various global benchmark categories. FTI concluded that the utilities have a high awareness of the value of DEI and have plans to make systemic changes across their organizations. The consultant also acknowledged best practices at Con Edison, Orange and Rockland, as well as the National Grid companies across many of these global benchmark categories. FTI recognized these companies' corporate vision and leadership as best practices, as the companies have embedded DEI in their organizational cultures as a core value, and their DEI strategies are an integral part of their overall organizational strategies. Regarding workforce management activities, FTI also found these companies ensure that DEI is integrated throughout their recruitment, professional development, advancement, and retention activities. FTI found Con Edison and Orange and Rockland are leveraging analytics to assess progress and establish accountability throughout their organizations. FTI also acknowledged that National Grid's communications are clear, transparent, and easily accessible for internal and external audiences alike. Concerning utility outreach activities, the consultant noted that most of the subject utilities are actively involved in their respective communities. FTI acknowledged National Grid's Project C, which outlines the company's New York community investment initiatives as an exemplary program for community impact. Similarly, FTI recognized Con Edison and Orange and Rockland for their social responsibility engagement by leveraging strategic partnerships across organizations throughout their service territory at numerous external institutions. You could go to the next slide, please. The draft order also highlights some areas of focus for the utilities to consider as they progress along their DEI journeys. The consultant emphasized that middle management buy-in is key for each utility advancement of DEI initiatives. So the plans should include activities to inform, educate, and engage middle management to increase support of these strategies. FTI noted that it was clear the utilities who have enjoyed the most success have found ways to engage managers and supervisors as advocates and champions. The consultant also recommended that the subject utilities address specificity gaps in their respective plans. As their DEI plans evolve, the subject utilities should ensure the plans contain a clear vision for DEI, including locally adopted priorities, near-term and medium-term activities with timelines, and measurable and localized goals. We could go to the next slide, thank you. The draft order before you acknowledges the excellent participation of the subject utilities throughout the working group efforts, as well as the progress achieved on the revisions to their respective DEI plans. The draft order acknowledges FTI's excellence in assisting the facilitation of the working groups. And given the success of the working group effort, and to ensure continued utility progress in these areas, the draft order proposes to continue these efforts with FTI and the subject utilities until 2025. We could go to the next slide, please. The continued working group effort would recommence in the first quarter of 2024. The multi-party contract for this engagement contains an extension provision that allows for continued work by the parties on matters related to this engagement for up to 3 years. So the FTI, the department, and the subject utilities will hold quarterly working group sessions and will work together to determine the timing of each session. The working group will have a programmatic structure overlaid with a responsive approach to allow flexibility to incorporate emerging utility challenges, DEI trends, as well as current events. It shall include areas of focus outlined in FTI's final assessment, including strategies for engaging leadership on DEI initiatives, establishing and implementing DEI metrics, as well as internal and external utility communications. In addition, the draft order highlights that this continued working group effort should consider supplier diversity programs and procurement in the ongoing sessions. It encourages the subject utilities to identify additional topics beyond those noted in FTI's assessment and the draft order. At the conclusion of the working group effort, the Commission will address the progress achieved, targeting the April 2025 session. The Commission will consider the necessity of the working group, of continuing the working group effort rather, or additional steps to further the subject utilities DEI efforts. This concludes my overview. I would like to thank the department staff team members that assisted the working group efforts and contributed to the development of this draft order. We are now available to answer any questions that the Commission may have.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the presentation and the prolific use of excellence. I don't think we've had a proceeding characterized that way as by so many in a while, so I'm encouraged and pleased to see the outcome of this. I remember when we started this June last year, we originally envisioned this being a one-year initiative, and to see it expand in the manner as described in this order is very pleasing, and it's very encouraging. I know utilities face an unprecedented array of challenges that are broad spectrum in scope and scale, everything from the need to transition to more efficient fuels, to also responding to increasing array of disasters and threats. But at the end of the day, it's that workforce, the utility workforce, that's going to confront these challenges head on. And it goes without saying they need to have the necessary skills and expertise, but the utility workforce should also reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve. And I think through this process, we're one step closer towards identifying opportunities to achieve that level of diversity. And so I'm very encouraged by the work. I'm pleased by the engagement you've described, both by the utilities and FTI and staff. And I'm very encouraged by the partnership and collective action exhibited by the utilities and the resulting individual progress that they've each made in having their DEI plan. So thank you for your hard work in putting this together, both through the working group and putting this order to make it something we do on an ongoing basis. Thank you for that. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I want to first thank staff for their hard work. I want to thank the utilities who have shown clear engagement, and I want to thank the consultant who filled a discrete role and brought needed outside expertise to the process. This is an iterative process focused on continuous improvement. I believe we are stronger and better because of our diversity, not in spite of it. And sensible DEI policies implemented with fidelity help to ensure people feel valued, accepted, and respected. I am very glad that this is going to be coming back to us as a commission body. It's important to show our leadership commitment to that. One of the challenges and trends that FTI showcased was that it's clear that utilities who have enjoyed the most DEI success have found ways to engage leaders as advocates and champions. So for us as commissioners, we have a role to play also. DEI culture, as you said, is embedded in the entities as a core value. When your culture is embedded as a core value, it helps to move forward. For me, I'd also like to see when we start this next process, engaging again with stakeholders and in the groups, that our own staff chair of our own new DEI committee is included in that, that the chair can also bring one or two people from the committee, because I think that that will help go a long way in ensuring that we are helping our staff in ideas and thoughts that might be able to make our DEI culture that much better. With that, I'm going to be voting for this, and I thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This can't do anything but good for us here and for the businesses and the governments and governmental entities that embrace this. And in view of the fact that there are actually 2 states in the United States of America that have actually outlawed any efforts at DEI, I wholeheartedly embrace this effort.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to praise this work here, and but on a going forward basis, I would make a few suggestions. The utilities collective bargaining agreements, and I believe could be a foundational component of our DEI efforts and the utilities DEI efforts. Each one of the investor-owned utilities described have reasonably good labor management committees that meet on a regular basis, and particularly as we go through technological changes and increased electrification, that partnership on an ongoing basis it will be absolutely essential. Additionally, each one of these utilities, certainly the energy utilities, all participate in federally approved apprenticeship programs, which again provide a real and meaningful opportunity to increase certainly the diversity of the workforce. And on top of that, we need a more diverse workforce because utilities, particularly those upstate, have appeared to have a very difficult time recruiting new workers, particularly those dealing with the more technical aspects, line mechanics, linemen, and whatever. Additionally, as part of this, and has done, is moving more as much as we can to recruiting the veterans community, many of who already do participate at a higher level of utility workforce than many other businesses across the state. And again, I think there's real opportunity, but we need to go down to the men and women who do the work, and what they see is necessary in terms of their own workforce and their peers. Again, I would also suggest that as we go forward, because it does make allusion to this, that the same process of DEI analysis go to the contracting bodies that these utilities use. Again, as part of the energy transition, much of the work will be done by third-party contractors on behalf of utilities. And again, I would hope that they would be required going forward in contracts to have that same level of DEI emphasis as the utilities do themselves. One thing that I think also going forward, and while it's not directly part of our charge, that the 2 state-owned utilities, the New York Power Authority and the Long Island Power Authority, we should try to find a way to have them participate with this DEI initiative as well. While not directly under the jurisdiction of this body, completely certainly dealing with workforce issues and the like, I do believe that they should be brought along, because the issues faced by the investor-owned utilities is identical to our state-owned utilities as well. I think that would also go to some of our major, we have a couple of relatively small water companies involved in this, relatively small, use that same thought goes into our municipal water supply stuff, because they are already subject to a variety of minority and women-owned business standards that have yet to become statutory requirements of the utilities. And again, I think they could provide some insight going forward. But again, good work. But again, the more we can, as the consultant emphasizes, start with the ground up and not the top down, I think that we will be greatly beneficial. And I think putting the unions right at the table would be a great first start. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jeff, and to other team members for the good work. I don't have any questions. I do want to just make a very brief comment that I do appreciate the flexibility on the part of staff in bringing the commission itself back into this process. I think, Peter, you indicated the target would be around April of 2025 so that we can have a direct role in continuing to monitor the progress that you all are making. So appreciate that change in the draft order, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. I really don't have anything to add. I think this is an encouraging report. My head is still spinning over Commissioner Alisi reminding us that some states have banned this type of work. I was born in the 60s. I thought we had left that decade behind, but it's amazing. But this is good work. This is important work, and I commend you for what you've brought before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do a call to the vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to accept and make public the consultant's report as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Okay. The item is approved and recommendations adopted. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move to our third item for discussion today. Item 301, case 18-E-0138, as it relates to the EV Make Ready Midpoint Review. It'll be presented today by Jen Roberton. Zerai Hagos and Stephanie McDermott are also available for questions. Ms. Roberton, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. My name is Jen Roberton, and I am the Transportation Lead in the Office of Markets and Innovation. I am here to present the order approving Midpoint Review White Paper's recommendations with modifications, which marks the culmination of the Midpoint Review of the Make Ready program under case number 18E-0138. The Make Ready program was authorized in July 16, 2020, in the order establishing electric vehicle infrastructure Make Ready program and other programs, also known as the Make Ready Order. The order authorized a $701 million investment in clean transportation, primarily focused on building the electrical infrastructure necessary to provide adequate charging access to New Yorkers. The program is built around analysis produced by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, EVI Pro Light tool, which predicted the number of chargers necessary to support 850,000 electric vehicles, or EVs, by 2025. The Make Ready incentives provide funding for the electrical work to make a site ready for EV charging. The Make Ready program has a three-tiered incentive structure with up to 50% of eligible costs covered if plugs are privately accessible only and/or use proprietary technology, up to 90% of eligible costs covered if plugs are publicly accessible and use non-proprietary technology, as well as an enhanced incentive at up to 100% of eligible costs covered if plugs are serving disadvantaged communities. Additionally, the order approved a suite of programs tailored towards the mobility needs of disadvantaged communities, including having 20% of the Make Ready budget dedicated to chargers in disadvantaged communities, a $96 million carve-out, as well as $10 million in Make Ready support for public transit depots and a $24 million pilot program for utility-side Make Ready for the medium and heavy-duty Make Ready pilot, $9 million of which was dedicated in the Con Edison rate case. Additionally, the Make Ready order authorized $85 million to create the New York Clean Transportation Prizes administered by NYSERDA and targeted to disadvantaged communities. Since the 2020 Make Ready order, 10 grand prizes have been awarded statewide across 3 categories: Clean Neighborhoods Challenge, which addresses pollution reduction at scale in disadvantaged communities, Electric Mobility Challenge, focusing on safe and convenient electric mobility options that help to solve disadvantaged community transportation needs, and the Electric Truck and Bus Challenge, funding innovative solutions to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle deployments. The Make Ready order directed staff to initiate a midpoint review of the program by no later than October 1st of 2022, and that this program review should utilize data collected from the program to consider its budgets and incentive levels, as well as emerging plug standards and other relevant program right-sizing. Staff commenced the midpoint review on August 30th of 2022, which was quickly followed by the midpoint review kickoff meeting on September 20th of 2022. Staff hosted a technical conference addressing a revised plug forecast developed by NREL on November 18th of 2022. This was followed by a technical conference addressing reporting data and vehicle grid integration on November 29th of 2022, and a technical conference addressing disadvantaged communities and medium and heavy-duty vehicles on December 1st of 2022. Building on stakeholder feedback gathered through technical conferences as well as historical program data and the updated plug forecast developed by NREL, staff filed the midpoint review white paper on March 1st of 2023. In the midpoint review white paper, staff proposed an incremental budget increase of $407 million, driven largely by the revised plug forecast developed by NREL that found a decrease in L2 and an increase in DCFC plug needs. This revised forecast is due to longer-range EVs and higher capacity chargers on the market, as well as a refined understanding of charging behavior. NREL also developed the first ever multi-unit dwelling specific charging analysis that furthered staff's understanding of the unique needs for L2 charging access in dense urban areas. Staff also revised the baseline per plug cost developed for the Make Ready order, which predominantly used national averages by instead using real-world historical program data. Staff also recommended that the Make Ready program expenditures remain in place until December 31st of 2025 if utility has met its revised plug goals or until authorized budgets are depleted. Finally, in the midpoint review white paper, staff proposed increasing the disadvantaged community budget to at least a 35% allocation for consistency with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the Climate Act. These proposed changes include maintaining the dedicated disadvantaged communities Make Ready budget to 20% for upstate utilities and for L2's downstate, but increasing the downstate disadvantaged communities allocation to a 25% for DCFC plugs to address high upfront costs and a lack of garage access. Staff suggested supplementing the disadvantaged community specific budget allocation to include a $25 million micromobility Make Ready program and proposed a $30 million incremental increase to the existing medium and heavy-duty Make Ready pilot, with expanded customer-side eligibility. Staff also proposed that the medium and heavy-duty Make Ready pilot, which requires that recipients also receive an incentive from the New York State Clean Truck Voucher Program, now add the EPA Clean School Bus Program as an additional eligible incentive. Both of these programs require the scrappage of an existing diesel vehicle to receive an incentive for a new electric model, thereby removing older polluting vehicles on the road. In addition to receiving 40 written comments from separate entities in response to the midpoint review white paper, staff convened 5 technical conferences and stakeholder sessions to provide ample opportunity for feedback. Staff hosted the midpoint review technical conference on March 22nd of 2023 to provide stakeholders the opportunity to ask clarifying questions and on the midpoint review white paper, as well as provide general feedback. A disadvantaged community stakeholder session was hosted by staff on April 27th of 2023. Technical conferences on data reporting, budgets and plug goals, as well as workforce development were hosted by staff on June 12th, 2023, July 27th, 2023, as well as September 7th, 2023, respectively. Stakeholders in written comments in the subsequent technical conferences encouraged staff to revisit the program budgets to account for the increase in DCFC costs as more favorable sites are developed. Staff also assumed in the midpoint review white paper that L2 plug needs at multi-unit dwellings and workplaces would receive the up to 50% incentive tier in most cases. Both stakeholder comments and subsequent data provided by the utilities in an interrogatory request submitted in August of 2023 suggested that many site hosts attempt to install plugs in locations that are publicly accessible to maximize their incentives. Lastly, stakeholders suggested that additional medium and heavy-duty Make Ready pilot funding would help support truck electrification, while broader efforts are addressed in the recently launched proceeding on the motion of the Commission to address barriers to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure under case number 23E0070. The order before you today modifies staff's white paper proposal in key respects in response to stakeholder feedback, revised programmatic data, and updated forecasting. In regards to the Make Ready program budget, the underlying baseline per plug costs are updated to reflect historical data from the August 2023 interrogatory request submission. The L2 baseline costs are a weighted average with downstate and upstate specific values based on this historical data. The DCFC per plug baseline is developed using a $1 per kilowatt weighted average from historical program data. The utility side per kilowatt DCFC costs was derived without projects that have no utility side costs to address concerns that projects will be more expensive as more favorable sites are developed. The budget and the order also uses historical data of the percentage of plugs committed and completed by incentive tier for upstate and downstate to develop assumptions on the allocation of incremental plugs by incentive tier. Further, the number of multi-unit dwelling plugs incentivized by the program are modified to contain program costs. While the primary focus of the program remains on publicly accessible charging stations, the modified multi-unit dwelling budget acknowledges the importance of the sector to reaching mass EV adoption, particularly in dense urban areas of the state. As of August 2023, 16,503 L2 and 1,115 DCFC were committed or completed in the Make Ready program statewide. The midpoint review order identifies the need for an additional 21,853 L2 plugs and 5,187 DCFC plugs to support 850,000 EVs on the road. Additionally, staff's white paper proposal to increase the medium and heavy-duty Make Ready pilot by $30 million is modified to an incremental increase of $43 million from the Make Ready order, and eligibility is expanded to include publicly accessible sites to address the immediate need to support this segment of the market. The total proposed midpoint review budget is approximately $1.243 billion, an incremental increase of $542 million from the 2020 authorization in the Make Ready order. The order modifies the Make Ready program's end date at the end of 2025 by replacing it with an additional review process that staff will commence by November 1st of 2025, or sooner if 70% of statewide plug goals are committed and completed. This additional review process will evaluate the Make Ready program's effectiveness, progress towards plug goals, budget modifications, the impact of proprietary technologies, the ramping down of incentive allocations, and the continued need for the program. Thank you for your time this morning. Zerai Hagos and myself are available in New York City for questions in person, and Stephanie McDermott from Council's office is in person in Albany.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. I appreciate the presentation. I'm very encouraged by the information you shared today, because it's an indication that the midpoint review process is in fact providing us with timely updates and the ability to revise and adjust our plans in a manner that can drive meaningful results. So I'm very pleased by that. I'm further pleased by the fact that the incentives are, in fact, driving the very results that we seek, increasing the number of publicly available charging stations available. So it's another green flag in this whole thing. And I think this is critically important because much of what's happening now is being driven, pun intended, by consumer adoption of EVs at increasing rates above and beyond anything we've predicted in the past. And if we are to be supportive and allies in making this transition a reality, we have to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that these charging stations are available. If they're not, or if there are a lot more barriers than people expect, we run the risk of being a hindrance to economic progress rather than supporting it. So I'm pleased to see the work you've done. I'm encouraged by the results and the allocation of funds and the way they're distributed, and also in part not because they're focused only on passenger vehicles, but because of the other funding streams for public transit and micromobility to address a wider array of the population. So thank you for putting this together in such a thoughtful manner, and I look forward to see where things go from here. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate a lot of the work that staff has done. I'm not as optimistic or focused on this is a good thing. I think that there are many challenges. I'm concerned that we have done the midpoint review but have not gotten under the hood on a lot of pain points, And I'm concerned that we are looking to increase the funding. The funding is pretty significant initially, and now we're layering on that even more. And I think that we are not directly addressing that. We have missed the mark in many areas as a state, and that perhaps the pivot point needs to be a more comprehensive look, not just with the commission, but the state in terms of what this means in targets and goals and funding, whether increasing, staying the same, or decreasing. I will note that because it is clear that we have changed the goalposts, that we are indicating that there are perhaps other areas that it's okay to look at whether we need to change the goalposts. Again, stay the same, increase, or decrease. And for that, I do think it's important to recognize, because we can't sort of pick and choose where we say, nope, we got to go, and we got to go, further and higher. And I want to understand that. What does that mean in our role in terms of a reevaluation of the targets and the goals that have been set? I also am concerned in here we give more funding and more jurisdictional reach to NYSERDA. Not necessarily inappropriate, not necessarily something that I wouldn't support, but I do think that doing things, again, here we have funding that's outside of the rate cases. Rate cases are really important, at least as I see it, to get under the hood. There's more months of scrutiny by staff, the ability to obtain books and records from the company to support the request for the rate increase, understanding how it fits with other priorities within the rate case, multiple rounds of testimony, transparent proceeding, multiple public records. And so it allows any interested stakeholder to request to be a party in the rate case and have an opportunity to debate the necessary funding being requested as part of that evidentiary process, which gets us to arrive at what the ultimate rates recommended in the joint proposal, whether they're sufficient. And so that funding issue being done outside of the rate case as it applies to the companies concerns me. But as it applies here to NYSERDA, we have traditionally looked at that through a petition by NYSERDA to increase their budget or to approve their budget, including administrative costs. And I am concerned that we're doing it out of that process and into a specific one. And again, why this one as opposed to others? I think there needs to be some sort of reconciliation of how it fits in the larger whole, and also more transparency from NYSERDA on that part of it, and more drilling down on the appropriateness of giving them more funding, giving them more jurisdiction, and also as it relates to administrative costs, pancaking on, just leaves me concerned and questioning. The other aspect here, and this I grapple with, I'm not a fan of working group by orders, just never have been. And sort of through my history of being at the commission, someone wants to research how many working groups, task force, or boards we've done since I've been on the commission. Appreciate it, go for it. But in this case, there was discussion on whether or not to have a new working group or to put it into the challenges here into the existing interconnection. And there were some parties, I think New York Best, who did not want a separate working group but wanted it in the interconnection. Can you talk a little bit about why there was sort of disagreement and why landing outside of the interconnection process.
Commissioner Berman, I can address that question. I think in terms of both your broader points around the rate case process versus a generic proceeding, and then looking right at the recommendations in the draft order to have a subgroup to the interconnection technology working group and interconnection policy working group meetings focused on the interconnection process for EV charging. Again, I think there are benefits to either approach of having a single working group or a subgroup. The draft order proposes a subgroup because the matters and the issues relating to the interconnection process for EV charging, that's a very discrete issue that, or initiative that requires parties to come up with a new process. And the current work of the ITWG or IPWG, which are the acronyms for those working groups, right, they've already worked through in detail a standard interconnection process for distributed generation and resolved that issue for DERs. And so the work of the broader working group is really focused in other areas. And so, you know, the draft order again proposes to have a subgroup to really handle that initiative discreetly. And I think the intention would be to, once that discrete issue is resolved, to bring those stakeholders into the broader working group to address more, I'd say, more detailed issues that the broader working group is focused on today, like UL standards for interconnection, and there are a bunch of other matters that are handled by those working groups, and there's arguments to have it both ways, but that's why the draft order proposed it the way it was.
All right, I can accept that. Again, I am not a big fan of working groups by commission order, especially sometimes I feel like some of the issues don't percolate up until too late to the commission, or don't percolate up at all, or frankly, we might do better in having more hands-on from the initial rather than at the back end. And you know, there's a lot of work that goes into working groups, some good, some bad, some indifferent, and looking to sort of what that looks like, I think is important. But I do think it's something to keep in mind because there did seem to be, you know, usually it's working group or no working group, and here it was working group, no working group, and something else, and existing working group. And so I kind of raised that. The other issue I just want to flag, there was one party comment that wanted to, if deployment in this sector continues to lag, the party recommended considering alternative ownership models, including utility ownership. I want to make clear that the commission is not supporting utility ownership here, or even looking at it perhaps later. And so that is not, while that party raises that, that's not an issue. If there is going to be any look at utility ownership, it really needs to be very transparent and clear, and make sure that we have stakeholder engagement on broader issues. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of focused. The other issue is the order gives, I think, I'm a little perplexed by it, but it gives to, we're directing Con Edison, not staff, we're directing Con Edison to submit a straw proposal describing the efforts put forth in streamlining their queue management system for consideration and development by the EV working group. Can you explain sort of that and why we're picking Con Edison out of all of the utilities here?
I can take that question, Commissioner Berman. As you probably recall, this January, the Commission had to take action to modify some of the program design specific to the Con Ed program, and that was really in response to market activity and a rapid increase in activity in the development of charging infrastructure in New York City that really hadn't happened in the rest of the state yet. And so through that process, staff has worked with Con Edison and we've observed them developing a number of practices to make their interconnection and application process to the programs more efficient. And so this draft order really just directs Con Edison to use that insight to develop a straw person proposal that the rest of the state can opine on and improve upon, because this issue really hasn't shown up in the rest of state yet. And so it's really a starting point. The commission may not use that straw proposal ultimately, or it may change drastically from what is proposed by Con Edison. But it was really an attempt to flush out in the public in a transparent manner those lessons learned in New York City for the use in the rest of state.
Okay, I think I can accept that, though I do have some concerns. I think it's for us as, directing staff, and when we're looking at something as a statewide perspective, obviously lessons learned from existing situations and folks who are already looking at it, I think, are helpful. But I do worry, we do have joint utilities. We do have to recognize that one utility is not, one size doesn't fit all. And so I don't want us to sort of start from, this perspective of a large utility who might be putting forward a great store proposal for them, but we're charging them to put a store proposal together for statewide consideration. So what I would suggest strongly is that Con Edison work with their sister utilities in a way that makes sure that other things that may be of consideration are looked at in a comprehensive way, that they feel the store proposal is representing more on a statewide basis rather than one specific utility. And so I frankly am not sure that this is the right way to go with asking them to do a store proposal. Technical conference where they present, fine, but I don't know, it just seems a little odd to me that we would do it this way. And again, I want to make sure that this doesn't then become sort of the norm for how we do other things, where it's really for us to determine what commission should do or determine what we need store proposals from staff. Just my own. If they want to if anyone wants to bring forward a petition, that's fine, but we don't usually direct store proposals on a statewide basis. So that's just my 2 cents. The other issue that I am going to raise is the micromobility issue. There's a lot of safety issues. There's a lot of challenges. And I recognize that we're trying to address disadvantaged communities and those who need other access, and micromobility may be helpful. I've just got to say it gives me great pause as we look forward in, again, what this looks like, and make sure that we are fully focused on the safety issues. And, there is some language in there that talks about why it's better because it's public. All that may be well and good, but I want to make sure that we are really looking at sort of an accountability perspective, whether these funds are helpful and whether it's not presenting other challenges, and that the funds may be used elsewhere. Do you want to speak a little bit about the micromobility issues?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Commissioner Berman. We're aware of the traffic safety issues in particular on micromobility. We know that's mostly dealt with locally. Like in New York City, NYPD will do a ticketing blitz at some points to make sure that people who are disobeying traffic laws, who are using e-bikes and e-scooters are ticketed and are responsible for breaking those laws. The program is addressing a form of mobility that's already being used widely by disadvantaged communities. As you mentioned, there's over 60,000 food delivery workers that use an e-bike or e-scooter. There's cargo bikes, over 350 across 3 different freight providers within New York City that are also using these devices. EVs still remain relatively expensive for a lot of disadvantaged community residents, and these vehicles are much less expensive and much more accessible. And we're hoping that this program will provide safe charging infrastructure while the safety issues on the road are being dealt with locally by PD and equivalent organizations.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that I flag is in this order, we are directing staff and the joint utilities to work directly with the agencies responsible for regulating affordable housing to increase awareness of and facilitate access to make-ready program incentives among eligible buildings, particularly in upstate service territories where uptake has been lagging. I'm not sure that I've seen an order where we direct staff and the joint utilities to work directly with the agencies responsible for affordable housing. I'm not opposed to it, but again, it sort of gives me pause on why do we see this as for EVs as the important one? To me, I would say, you know, are there other priorities that take precedent where we should be sending a signal in our orders that we want our staff and the joint utilities to work with the specific agencies on that deal with housing. Our staff does work already informally, but I just felt, I'm not sure that I feel 100% comfortable that the first time that I can remember where we're doing a directive like this, we're picking them to work on, you know, the EV charging versus perhaps energy efficiency or sub-metering issues or, you know, heat and hot water issues that really are more front and center to me as priorities. But be that as it may, I do think it will be interesting to watch and also to have the data reporting back to us. The other thing is we do hear talk about what information should be, what call number should be, you know, when there are problems, right? Who do you call? And so wanting that information so that people can know who to call. And, you know, there is concern if you have too many numbers, you know, everybody's gonna get confused and pick the wrong one. I don't know, frankly, I'd like, if I have an issue, I want as many numbers as I can, and I want the one number that I call to be solving my issue. I do worry that we will have lack of tracking on the complaint process and lack of tracking on being able to understand the communication that was received in a timely fashion on issues that people are having, and that it'll sort of be more word of mouth. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Definitely. The recommendation to have the phone numbers on the chargers came out of the Customer Experience Working Group. We had our last meeting in August of 2022. We got really helpful feedback on the types of issues that consumers are facing accessing EVSC across the state. A notable issue is outages and block chargers. A way that that's being addressed through data reporting, we're adopting a national standard for uptime, a new formula that's administered through or used by FHWA for NEVI funding. So if that consistent formula that's brand new for the program, we're hoping will be a way to get much more accurate data around outage information in particular. In the existing make-ready order, we have a provision that we need outage information. We don't describe exactly how that has to happen. So adopting something nationally hopefully will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I know a lot of this came out through our ongoing work as a state with other states, but we don't really have in here how we compare with other states. And I do think that that information is something that requires more sort of focus and also looking at what are the challenges, where are we, you know, on a grade-wise compared to other states in specific issues and lessons that we can learn from that. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, definitely agreed. We're in conversation with our counterparts in California across the EV proceedings, and I guess to agree that that's something that we're doing ongoingly informally as staff, and we learn a lot from our counterparts on the West Coast. They tend to be a little ahead of us, but there's some programs where we can collaborate and learn more from their initiatives.
As to battery storage, I was struck on page 64 of the order where it says, it's talking about on-site energy storage paired with EVs, and talking rightfully so about the potential to further integrate renewable energy with electric vehicle charging and provide peak reduction. But we say that while the Commission clarifies that any energy storage device receiving Make-Ready program incentives must be paired exclusively with EVs and be solely used for EV charging and not for any other purpose, such as providing backup power to the host site. So I just want to sort of look at that. If I'm reading this right, we may be missing the mark if there's an opportunity to utilize this to provide backup power to the host site. And so I understand, I think, trying to make sure that it's getting used specifically for the EV charging, and that's the goal and the direction, right? But we're pairing it with something that may have other uses. And so I'm just concerned that we're limiting ourselves in a way that may be problematic. And I don't know if you have any thought on that.
Leah, hear the concern, Commissioner, and agreed that on surface there's maybe some lost opportunities, but the main intent of that within the order is to make sure we're not double incentivizing storage, just recognizing that we have other programs that support storage, so we don't want to have site host or an entity access some of our storage-related incentives administered by utilities, and then also get an incentive through Make-Ready. So the intent was to make sure that the incentives were going to the right place.
So what I would say is, what we really want to do is say, we are open to providing backup power to the host site, but we recognize that we do not want to inappropriately provide double incentives. Therefore, from an accountability, first of all, a lot of this from an accountability perspective, we're going to need to make sure that there's not double incentive counting, et cetera, so that we really are open to it, but that we are concerned about double incentives and other things, and so we really need to be mindful of that. We should be mindful of that across the board in everything we do, but rather than what I see as limiting language that may be missing, as you said, a good lost opportunity. And then the only other thing is just really a nit for me. In the order, it's discussing pay-to-park lots. And in our discussion and determination, we say the Commission declines to modify the current eligibility criteria for pay-to-park lots in line with staff's recommendation. I support that. But then we say, given only one comment was received on this subject, the Commission finds that the current treatment of such locations effectively encourages the build-out of publicly accessible infrastructure. I don't want the misperception to be that if we don't receive comments or we only get one comment, that we're good to go. In fact, I really question sort of, is that truly defining that we're good to go? Or is it just lack of either interest in submitting comments or perhaps, comment fatigue? In this case, it's probably good to go, but I do think that to be in an order saying that as sort of that's the rationale, I think we need to just be a little bit careful that we don't, quickly adopt that for all things when it's more about comment fatigue or other things. So with that, I am, with great hesitation, going to be concurring on this. I am truly concerned about the direction and the funding issues. And so I think we really need to really be careful, and I think we need to take a hard look at all of our CLCPA and other climate energy goals and targets and kind of look at what we're doing on a holistic basis. And while it's difficult to, have to make some course corrections, it's really now is the time. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your collective efforts. The expertise and professionalism of the staff once again is on full display here. Now, this is very ambitious, and at some point I think ambition and reality will come face to face. I hope ambition prevails, and that would give perfect testament to your hard work, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think both Zerai and Jen know how much this subject matter means to me personally and professionally. And I think I don't know anything I have spent more time on as a commissioner than the issue of EVs. My first question is, will the state of New York make our original goal of 850,000 EVs on the road by 2050 or 2025, pardon me?
Commissioner Howard, I will note that staff, we're not, auto industry analysts, but our current perspective is that the state is not on track to achieve 850 electric vehicles on the road by 2025. And, we do note that, right as the order was released during the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so the goals were established before knowledge of that really seismic shift to the landscape to develop anything in the state of New York. We had any knowledge of that. So, I think the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain shortages that resulted as coming out of that pandemic did certainly impact the rate in which I think we would have otherwise grown the EV market here in New York. And then I'd say in the more near term, the IRA passage did create additional incentives for EVs, but that requires Build in America for many of the EV models, and that further slowed the pace in which I think we would have otherwise seen. So I think there's a number of compounding issues that have caused us to fall short of the 850 mark. But looking at the current rate of growth, looks like we could still get there in 2026 or 2027 if we just keep pace with the current growth rate year over year.
So, like much that we are facing now in the electrification and CLCPA adoption, maybe it's time. We've acknowledged through this order that we are recalibrating our goals. That's not to say that, as you know, personally, I was skeptical of the goal from day one, COVID notwithstanding, but now we know. Now we move on. So we're going to miss our original target for a variety of reasons. And I do understand the effort of this order to foster a quicker level of adoption. Have we calculated, we are now approaching, we are exceeding practically $2 billion in this program. Have we calculated rate impacts to customers on this new request for revenue?
To clarify, the proposed budget increase moves from $701 million up to $1.243 billion in total, as a kind of budget bound cap on what utilities can spend through this program. And the draft order does present revenue requirement impacts of the proposed budget in the appendix. And I believe the range that reflects the total program spend occurring through the end of 2025, and then the effective bill increase that could be driven exclusively by the cost of the program in 2026. And the estimates, I think, are ranging from 0.7% increase to somewhere around 1.7%, depending on which utility we are talking about. The draft order also does note, however, that those are very conservative estimates because it doesn't factor in the likely increase in revenue that offsets the increase in cost, because as EV charging grows and non-electric, fuel consumption for transportation is absorbed into the utility sector, there will be more throughput of the distribution system, and that has a offsetting bill reducing effect. And so those are very, very conservative estimates in our opinion.
So I just want to make the point on this is that this is, to use my well-worn phrase, another pancake on the stack of our way to decarbonization and CLCPA compliance. So again, it sounds very inexpensive or relatively inexpensive out of context. But as we add the entire cost of programs, this is just one more increased cost to ratepayers. And again, I guess I'll use this time this is a major policy initiative that in many respects, like many things we're doing in this space, I think could be better spent with more general fund revenue and less ratepayer dollars. Have we calculated any increase broad load characteristics going forward to the entire system as EVs are more adoption, and what we may anticipate going forward through the period of this order, what the percentage of growth of load of the investor-owned utilities may be attributable to EV charging?
Commissioner Howard, this order doesn't present utility-specific load forecasts that are just the incremental portion driven by EV charging. Each rate case proceeding does have generally a 3-year horizon that does include the effects of EV charging load, and that's I'd say, most granular utility-specific analysis that we would point to. I will also say that in advance, or prior to the order, as the state developed a clean transportation roadmap, when we were first examining, the costs and the effects of CLCPA on transportation electrification, staff did work with NYSERDA to estimate the distribution system impacts of transportation electrification across the state at a very high level. And we did publish something that's called the TEDI study that does include long-term load forecast projections and the expected utility investment required to the distribution system. And we did that through 2050 through the achievement of the broad climate policies here in New York State. And so we did have that analysis in advance of this order.
The reason I ask is there are two major drivers of load increase going forward. One will be buildings, and the other will be transportation. So again, something that we must keep in mind. And then as we calculate going forward, because all of the interrelationships, that how many new kilowatts we're going to need at all levels, not only at the distribution level, but at the generation level and transmission level. One of the things that's always concerned me, and I've spoken to you two multiple times on this, is the issue of performance standards. I know that we are now trying to get a handle on how many EV chargers just don't work. And as from our customer experience and broader other our customer experience working group and just other stuff in the popular press, that a huge percentage of the current fleet of public EV chargers just don't work on any given day. And that being the case, I know this is a carrot approach to EV charging. So what is the stick to make sure that when we pay for something, it actually is going to work?
Howard, it's a considerable barrier to the adoption of EVs and the usage of EVSE. Mentioned earlier that we are adopting that national outage standard, which will make our data quality much better and much more consistent with what's happening in other states. But I'll also note within our recommendations for data reporting, the JU and staff are directed to work together towards a data reporting compliance filing, and included in that will be a preferred network list. So we know that some EVSE networks are better than others around just reliability, data quality, and outages, and wanting to provide that information to consumers, to site hosts who are installing chargers as well, who maybe aren't well-versed on the different options out there. We're imagining will be, or we're hoping will be helpful to address some of those issues as well.
So we currently have no plan yet to deal with some sort of penalty to comply. People will be able to take ratepayer money, but we don't have an ability as of yet to get the money back or provide some penalty if what we paid for doesn't work. Is that correct?
The make-ready order does include a clawback provision, so the utilities do have the ability to claw back incentives if needed. A complication that's come up in our discussions of the JU and stakeholders is often the incentives go towards a site host who maybe are unaware of the quality of charger that they're installing. They just want to have an amenity for people using their parking facility. So the recipient of the incentive and the entity that's actually responsible for outages are just at times two different entities. So clawing back the incentives to date hasn't felt appropriate where the issues are today, so we're hoping that data compliance reporting and making that much more stringent could be a way to start addressing some of those issues.
The reason I ask, because, and certainly anecdotally, maybe as much as 1 in 4 chargers that are currently in the fleet and just don't work on any given day. And probably the single biggest frustration for current EV owners is finding, and particularly when they're directed through the internet or a variety of other things. I noticed there's a pending piece of legislation dealing with hosting a website that will direct people to charging stations that may or may not be working. So in that regard, I do believe that's something that we should pursue in earnest very soon. Because while state statute currently doesn't treat the buying and selling of electricity for vehicle charging as a utility function, it's sort of walking and talking like a duck. I note on the micro-mobility aspect of this, last week, the FDNY was quite stringent in their language regarding their real fear of death through fire death because of poorly constructed and maintained micro-mobility devices, i.e. electric bikes and the like. So have they participated, and we reached out in any meaningful way to the FDNY on how this micro-mobility program will enhance their goals of public safety?
So we have had, through comments, engagement with the City of New York as a broad entity. We've had direct conversations with NYCHA in particular, since many of these fires are happening within NYCHA property, and they're very supportive of having a program that will help them install micromobility charging outdoors within a disadvantaged community that won't be impacting the property and life of residents if there is a fire, which hopefully there isn't, with more of safer infrastructure and some of the work that New York City's leading around UL approval for batteries sold within New York City, which will hopefully help with some of those fire safety issues. If there is a fire outdoors at an installation that's installed formally as opposed to an extension cord inside someone's apartment, we're optimistic that that will address some of those issues. They are significant.
Well, I strongly suggest that in the near term we reach out directly to the FDNY to get their direct input and not just through the mayor's office. I note that Nassau and Suffolk counties lead our state in terms of EV adoption, and they aren't part of this program. So have we had discussions with LIPA on where they're at vis-a-vis a parallel program, or even the need, given the fact that they have had the most significant growth of EV registrations?
Commissioner Howard, the Long Island Power Authority did authorize a Make Ready program that was modeled after the program approved by this commission in 2020. The Make Ready program in Long Island is authorized through their Utility 2.0 process, which has an annual update, of which staff provides written feedback. And so there has been close alignment between DPS staff and the Long Island Power Authority and PSEG Long Island in ensuring that those ratepayers also have support from the utility to deploy charging infrastructure. I think their program is a year or two behind the IOU programs that are authorized through this proceeding. But as you noted, they have really strong adoption of EVs in that area, primarily due to demographic characteristics in Long Island. And they also have a large incidence of drivers who have access to charging at home. And so it's been a real bright spot in terms of EV adoption across the state.
Yeah, as we've discussed before, clearly early adopters of technology are more well-heeled than many New Yorkers, and that's how it happens. So again, it is gratifying to see that EV adoption is going higher in the higher income neighborhoods, but again, catching everybody else up will be very difficult. The last I'm going to say is that I am increasingly concerned, or on a going forward basis, that these incentive programs are not permanent on the rate base. Motor vehicle fueling has, in the United States and in this state, has been a private sector funded operation since the inception of the automobile, and that the entire model, I do believe, needs to get back to private sector funding. I have some note that several of the major OEMs are now involved in this space, and I find that to be very gratifying, particularly General Motors in their recent the proposals, and that on a going forward basis, just as a matter of policy, the more we can move these activities to private capital, I think the better we're going to be. Again, I have been supportive of this with some degree of skepticism from day one. I will continue to support this, and I will support this order. However, we have a lot of tough stuff to go through. and I think particularly vigilance and monitoring all aspects of this order become more important than ever. So again, Jennings right. You know how much I appreciate your work personally. I think you're some of the best in the business, and I would just one more cautionary tale is we're not California, and many of the lessons learned in California. Having just come back from there and seen $6 a gallon gasoline, I understand why EVs look pretty popular. So again, it is an economic decision on how much it costs to operate your vehicle that drives many Californians. So again, I do appreciate your good work, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
I have no comments or questions and will be supporting the item.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
I'll also be supporting the item. A couple comments. It's a very extensive order, and there's a lot of material in there. I think of it as a report. It's not a report, it's an order. The order is attempting to address challenges that we're encountering while we, as a society, are attempting to facilitate massive change. And this is not in the material on the record, but I happen to be listening to a podcast by the New York Times today that was commenting on the Inflation Reduction Act's attempt to convert the whole country from combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. And the commentary was that the part of the plan to stand up an ecosystem within the United States from the point of extracting minerals from the ground to the point of selling the vehicles has been successful in a very short period of time. What's been less successful is the consumer adoption of electric vehicles at the speed and rate that the plan had envisioned. But if you go back, if you look from a more historical perspective, we as a society have done this before. The ownership of combustion engine vehicles is really a phenomenon of the last 130 years or so. And there was a broad articulation of a policy goal when that industry was just standing up that some of us will remember. It was part of a campaign slogan: a chicken in every pot, a car in every garage, right? And that was Herbert Hoover's campaign slogan in 1928. And his broad policy goal reached an impediment in the Great Depression. If you look at Chairman smiling. If you look at vehicle ownership rates, there's a steep line going up until the Depression set in. And then after the war, the steep line goes back up. It is a mistake. Well, I'm not going to say it that way. The goal was achieved in large part, not exclusive part, due to massive government subsidies of the soup to nuts opportunity to own and operate combustion engines. We're making adjustments now, and I think we're moving, not as fast as we want to, but in historic terms, very, very quickly. I've mentioned this before, and again, it's not part of the material, but in 2006, I went into the movie theater and I saw a documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car? And the premise was that the whole idea of the electric car was plausible, but it was dead. And that was in the movie theater 17 years ago. And now we're talking about, do we have enough working charging stations to facilitate the entire turnover of the state of New York? And so, surprise, we're doing something complicated and we're running into roadblocks and we're doing something in order to overcome the challenges. That's not a surprise. I find this actually very encouraging. We're going to encounter other difficulties. It's a noble goal. I think we're going to achieve the goal. And so I'm going to be voting yes, and I want to commend you for your work. This is the first time I got the chairman to smile in a long time. I'm just going to note that too for the record.
try harder. Thank you. So that's it. We'll do a call for vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve the midpoint review white paper's recommendations as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I concur.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you. Great job. We will now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any of the items on the consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Berman.
Yes, thank you. I have 5 items I'm going to make some brief comments on. 164, which is the Seneca Nation item, I'm going to be concurring. Not sure I fully agree with the CLCPA language in there, but I am supportive of the item itself and think it is legally sufficient. So I will be concurring. On item 261, this is a consumer complaint where the staff is recommending to us that the commission deny the complaint's appeal and uphold the informal review decision. I take a pause. I agree and I will be concurring on this item, but I just want to flag that in this item, in the determination, it states that the complainant cites a Senate bill, which happens to be Senate Bill 334, 2023, 334, proposing amendments to the Public Service Law. However, as of this date of this determination, the proposed changes and subsequent versions of those proposed changes have not been given to the governor, nor has the governor signed any of them. Therefore, the company's compliance with these amendments or lack thereof is not an issue ripe for consideration and will not be addressed here. As of actually November 13th, the bill, which was passed by both houses, has been sent to the governor and is awaiting either a veto or an approval. I raise this because going back to the history of it, there was a veto message in 2022, number 145, that stated, and this bill is to address requirements regarding billing for electric services, and it will require that electric and gas bills include additional information, including the highest charge per specific line item. And the veto message said, and I quote, "While I am in favor of increasing public awareness of information on utility bills, requiring utilities to provide this extremely specific information would lead to costs to ratepayers that outweigh the marginal benefits such information would provide. Additionally, it would result in a significant administrative burden for the utilities, particularly the smaller municipal utilities, and could complicate and thereby dilute the informational value of the bill itself." And so the governor vetoed the bill. I raise this because I do think that there was recently in this year, there was another bill that dealt with not utilities but ESCOs and others, which also had the same, I think, value, but perhaps has some complicating factors in terms of what this means in terms of impact on implementation. However, here, there's an opportunity for us to look at pending bills, in this case before the governor for either veto or signature, and see, while we're looking at this, well, if this bill was law, what would it mean? Would it be helpful to this situation? Would it not be? Do we agree with the past veto? This bill language, it looks like it was pretty much the same bill resubmitted without taking into consideration the changes from the veto. So while I understand that this complainant can't take advantage if the bill is passed, I do think it's an opportunity for us to make sure we fully understand and weigh in on whether or not this is a good thing for consumers or a bad thing, and what it may mean. I know right now it looks like it's probably veto worthy, but that's just sort of my read of it. The other thing in here is that the complainants, Pandering Pig Restaurant, raised an issue that the complainants, restaurant owners, came to the hearing without counsel, and they felt that they would have done better if they had showed up with counsel. I think this is an ongoing challenge. We do correctly provide that we give them the information that they don't need to come with counsel, but that they can if they want, and we do that. However, it is something for us to consider as we go forward, because I do believe that we may be looking at, some situations that perhaps making sure that folks, as they move forward, if they're not providing, if they don't have counsel that knows the ins and outs, there's a challenge. And some of these may work out better for them. I don't think in this case it would have. But this was a restaurant with a billing issue during COVID that concerned them, that I think that sort of in light of all of that, it required us to perhaps take more of a careful look in how the process worked, because I feel that they feel left behind from the concerns that they had. On its face, we can't do anything with what's before us, and so the decision has to be upheld. But I do think it's something that's at least worth noting, that I'm mindful of. So I will be concurring on that item. On 361, this is another consumer complaint issue. And really, initially when I looked at it, and again, I understand sort of the constraint we have in dealing with this issue. Here, the complainant is upset about where the utility pole was installed, and raised concerns about installing the pole between two existing poles close to the complainant's home. And there's a lot of back and forth on wanting to remove the pole and what the concerns were. And these are things that I think are pretty much, probably comes up a lot for the utilities in terms of dealing with the challenges of pole placement, whether it's for aesthetics or perceived safety or other issues with poles, on an individual basis. We have a larger issue perhaps sometimes on siting the poles, et cetera. Here, we can't get involved in what's really a dispute over the placement of the utility pole that's essentially an issue going to property rights, and I understand that. And the commission, we don't adjudicate property rights, so the course of action would be to bring this in court rather than before the commission if the complainant doesn't feel satisfied. But the reason I have an issue, and I guess I raise this, is as a consumer, in this case, this is a homeowner, there should be an understanding of what the process is for a property owner who has an issue with placement of the telephone pole or any similar utility asset that is on their home or near their home or their residence. And I recognize that we can't get involved in this, and there's actually language in the order that points to the process a consumer could use to request a pole relocation. And it states, the IMO, Independent Hearing Officer, stated that the complainant could, pursuant to the company's tariff, hire a licensed electrician to request the pole be relocated if they were willing to pay the cost of the work or petition the municipality to change the approved location for the pole. And I get that. It's a sound tariff language. But I do think that we should be a little bit more open to helping the customer in knowing what the process is and helping them sort of work through it. Because if there is a safety issue, if there is a problem, it should be looked at and taken care of. And so it just seems to me that we might be a little bit dismissive because it's a utility pole and not really our issue, and work with the utility or the municipality in doing that. And I think that for some, it can be challenging to do that. And so I just raise it because I want to make sure that people feel that their concerns are raised. Frankly, I'd like to see a picture of where it is, just to see, is it just an aesthetics issue? Not to diminish an aesthetics issue, but just to make sure that we kind of followed the right process and that it made sense, and that there was some at least consideration of what that looks like. Ultimately, the customer may have to decide whether he or she wants to pay for the movement of it or work with the municipality. But in this case, I just feel like too often we just bump these as, well, it's not us, we don't, it's a property right issue, and goodbye, good luck. And maybe we need to just be a little bit more thoughtful and just taking a double check to make sure that there isn't an issue. So with that, I say I'm going to concur on that. 382, I am concurring. This is dealing with implementing immediate solutions. It's dealing with EVs, and it's same concurrence as my 301 item. 385, I think, is a very important item. Frankly, it would have, I think, been a good item for discussion agenda because I do think there's a lot of important information in this that's I think, relevant. NYSERDA brought a petition, and in this petition, they sought sort of three things. They sought for us to adopt the new RCF to future solicitations. They sought to require that we not require wanting us to fix the UPF value to be aligned with working with the new or future ISO rules. And they also wanted us to revise strike prices of past contracts. They were focused on the 2022 procurement projects that were selected, and we're asking for us to do that. So a couple of things. One, NYSERDA is making the petition, unlike in the October session where they did not weigh in on pending procurement contracts. And here they're asking us to revise state strike price of past contracts. Now, I want to make very clear what we're doing and what we're not doing. And the reason they wanted us to change the pricing of past contracts is saying it's a change of law provision, and that therefore we should do that. The change of law, those change of law provisions on their face totally don't apply, because they already knew about the New York ISO accreditation changes and rules, and though NYSERDA still wanted us to tweak those contracts. But as I read it, the market had full awareness of the changes when they bid, and so even if we were to look at that, it doesn't apply. So here, we are declining to adopt modifications to the CES Tier 1 and offshore wind procurements prior to 2022, given existing contract provisions that NYSERDA already utilizes to reflect these new ISO rules. But as I looked further at this, and what made me sort of take a double pause, if there is such a thing as a double pause, but is the NYSERDA's request for information, RFI release date January 6, 2023. Responses were due Friday, February 17th, 2023. one, it gives a longer ramping time than the most recent RFI from NYSERDA. But on page 3 of this RFI, under background on New York ISO capacity accreditation rules, there's a chart here on marginal capacity value of solar and wind. And as I read it, and I'm looking at this chart, it shows that we need, clearly from this RFI, we need tremendous amounts of dispatchable resources to meet peak. We need tremendous amounts of dispatchable resources to meet peak. So I think the key takeaway, at least as I see it, is we should as a state be shouting this from the rooftops in a very clear way. Dispatchable resources are really, really important as we move forward. Reliability is really, really, really important as we move forward. And I think that we are seeing that capacity resources value is going down. We're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to look at what this means, and look at, you know, working with the ISO and the Reliability Council on the value of in markets, the value of us being very focused on the need for dispatchable resources and reliability, and the importance of that. And so again, I flag this because I think it's really important. So 385, I will be concurring on, and I'm flagging what I see as a really important issue, looking at the documents. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
I'll be voting yes on all issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you. I just want to I'll make one comment on item 385. I do appreciate what could be viewed as a conservative approach of staff on these issues, particularly on the request for do-overs on contracting. Again, the cornerstone of our entire procurement process going forward has almost exclusively been on a competitive nature, and when companies submit bids, you know, we've gone through difficult times. Well, that's part of the risk of markets, and markets also anticipate failures. And I do appreciate our approach here, that we are very skeptical of do-overs. But again, that being said, I will support the entire agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
No comments on any items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I'm going to abstain from 3 items and vote no on 1 item. The 3 items I'm abstaining on are 374, 378, and 379. And I'm going to cast a no vote on 164, and I would like to explain why I'm casting a no vote on that item. This order would authorize the proposed transfer of assets related to the delivery of natural gas from an entity regulated by this commission to one that is not regulated by this commission within an area that is outside this commission's jurisdiction. I do not disagree with the long-established precedent that the Public Service Commission lacks jurisdiction over Indian nations. I do, however, believe that the CLCPA applies to actions taken by the PSC itself, and that this vote should be considered an administrative approval or decision under Section 7 of the CLCPA, and therefore should contemplate whether this action is inconsistent with or will interfere with the attainment of statewide greenhouse gas emission limits, and for that matter, whether this action will disproportionately burden disadvantaged communities. I am not suggesting whether this action would do so or not in either case, but we are not considering these questions, which I believe is required by the CLCPA. For that reason, I'm going to cast a no vote on this item. Other than that, I'm voting yes on everything else.
Thank you. So my vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I vote yes, except I'm concurring on 164, 261, 361, 382, and 385. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items except for 374, 378, 379, which I'm abstaining from, and 164, which I'm voting no on.
Thank you. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Madam Secretary, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further to vote on.
Thank you. Appropriate wording. So before we adjourn, I'd like to take a moment to share my and I know our appreciation for our former colleague, Commissioner Tracy Edwards, whose last session with the Commission took place in October. During her years with the Commission, Tracy's extensive private and public sector knowledge, experience, and insight helped support Commission action on a wide array of topics. Our review of the DEI efforts underway by the joint utilities earlier is just one example of the many orders in which she helped shape, and I personally wish to thank her for her guidance and support in bringing forward that initiating order in 2022. Its impact thus far has been commendable, and I anticipate it having a lasting legacy on reinforcing the relations between utilities and the communities they serve. In every discussion, in every order, Tracy's commitment to ratepayers was always on display, as was her unwavering support to the Commission's core mandates for the provision of safe, secure, and reliable access to utility service. So I know I'm grateful we were able to benefit from her presence on the Commission, and I am excited that we can continue to benefit from her expertise and support as she becomes chair of the LIPA board. So I want to thank again former Commissioner Tracy Edwards for her time, and we'll be putting forward a resolution to commend her and her time here and recognize it with the Commission. Thank you. And with that, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.